The Still Point Meditation Center in Vienna is going to start a recording based on a work from Indian tradition called the Yoga Vasishtha Sara. And we start today with the first chapter, the first part. The Yoga Vasishtha Sara is a work consisting of 32,000 Sanskrit verses, traditionally attributed to a sage Valmiki. The dates are unknown, but it is estimated that he lived between the 5th and the 1st century before Christ. It basically is a dialogue between the sage Vasishtha and Sri Rama. This work was then shortened some centuries ago by another sage called Abhinanda Pandita into 6,000 verses. It's still a huge amount of verses, but a little less than the 32,000 original ones. And that work is then called Lagu Yoga Vasishtha. Finally, a further condensation was made by an unknown author into about 230 verses, divided into 10 chapters. And that is the work we're going to use in these coming recordings. And it's based on the work called Yoga Vasishtha Sara, or Essence of the Yoga Vasishtha. The English translation that we are going to use was made by the Sri Ramana Maharshi Ashram in India. So we will start with verse number 1. And each verse will be commented on one by one. Today we will probably cover about 5 such verses. 1. Salutations to that calm radiance, which is endless and unlimited by space, time, etc. The pure consciousness which can be known by experience only. That's the end of the first verse. And it immediately introduces us with that which is being pointed at throughout this whole work, namely consciousness or awareness. In other traditions, like in Zen Buddhism, we speak about Buddha nature, which is more or less the same thing. We chant there, Buddha nature pervades the whole universe, revealing right here and now. That is what is being spoken about, the calm radiance which is endless and unlimited by space, time, etc. That space of awareness in which our bodies, our thoughts, our feelings, our sense perceptions constantly appear and disappear. Indeed, all objects that we can perceive are limited, but that which perceives those objects is unlimited. Take, for example, a body, your body, this body. It's limited. It has a certain height. It has a certain size. It's limited. But something is aware of this body. That which is aware of this body is unlimited. Take another example, your thoughts. Your thoughts are seen by aware space, like a little movie being played on a screen. And while the movie or the thought has a limited duration in time and in kind of a visual framework as well, that which perceives the thought, that which perceives the little movie, is unlimited. Or take your sense perceptions. You can see an object in your room where you are seated. It's always going to be limited. It has a certain shape, a certain dimension. Or any sound. It has a certain duration. It is limited. It has a certain characteristic. It is limited. But that which hears the sound, that which sees the object, is not limited. And the same can be said about smells and tastes as well. And all of these objects that I have just given as examples can only be known by what this verse is calling direct experience. And so the same can be said about that which is aware of those objects. The awareness that is being aware can vaguely be described, like this verse is doing, as a calm radiance, which is endless and unlimited by space, time, etc. And that is what this whole work of the Vasishtha Sara is talking about. So let's take a few moments in silence to reflect on that space, on that radiance, which is what you are, which is what we are. Verse number 2. Neither one who is totally ignorant, nor one who knows the truth, is eligible to study this book. Only he who thinks, I'm bound, I must become free, is entitled to study it. End of verse. What this verse is conveying is that if you, the viewer here, never had any experience, any taste of what consciousness might mean, called the divine in some other circles, called Buddha nature in other circles, if you never had such an experience yourself, you would then be at a loss when hearing these words. I often give the example of, say, a person who lives in the North Pole, an Eskimo, and who has never in his life eaten a mango, and who asks you to describe how it is, what the experience is. If you try to explain this to this person, he may get some sense, okay, it's something sweet, it's something juicy, but he will never really get to the direct experience of what a mango is. And the same can be said here. Consciousness, which this work, Yoga Vasishtha Sara, is talking about, will only make sense if you have some kind of an experience in the past that allows you to understand vaguely what is being meant. And all the way at the other side of the spectrum, if you, the viewer, are a person who is already firmly established in consciousness and who experiences this in many different circumstances, you should also then not read this book because you already know what it is, and reading it would not add anything, any information, and would not make sense for you. Because then it becomes like saying, this cushion there is green. Yes, it's a fact. But if you already know that, there is no need to study the fact that this cushion is green. In the same way, if you already experience consciousness regularly, there is no sense of studying this book about consciousness. It is for the person who is between these two extremes, that means between the person who never experienced it and the person who is established in it, that this book is addressed. The one who knows somehow there is something like that and who would like to experience it, who would like to seek for it. And that person is usually then also a person who thinks he is bound and he needs to be liberated. Having said that, I would like to propose that all of us have had this experience in our lives. If not recently, we were actually born as babies, bathing in this light of consciousness. And somehow we all have kept a vague memory of how that felt like. We all have faint memories of childhood being some kind of a lost paradise. A lost paradise which we now try to look for in many ways. So in a way, we could say that all of us have had an inkling of what is being talked about here. And so this book addresses many more people than otherwise would be the case. Let us again take a few moments of silence to try to figure out, reflect on where you, the viewer, are at this moment. Have you had such experience? Have you tasted it yourself before? Or never? Or are you already established in it? Verse number 3. Until one is definitely blessed by the Supreme Lord, he will not find either a proper guru or the right scripture. This verse is very similar than verse number 2, because blessed by the Supreme Lord can be interpreted here as he who has had the taste of consciousness already. Or in Zen terms, we often speak of someone whose Dharma eye has already been opened. In this connection, I would like to relate to my own experience. I once was walking on cliffs in England, and the ocean was right there. And suddenly I've got some experience of unity, of oneness. The sea, the birds, the sky, everything was one. There was no longer me here and nature there. 3 weeks after that happened, I met Jean Klein, my first Advaita teacher. And when I heard Jean Klein teaching the teaching of Advaita, I immediately thought, this is what I experienced when I had this experience of unity in England 3 weeks ago. And so what he was teaching about suddenly made a lot of sense to me. And if I would not have had that experience these 3 weeks before, then I would have heard his teachings and it would not have made a lot of sense to me. So I would like to invite you again in a few moments to try to reflect whether yes or no you have had yourself such an experience. Maybe while you were walking in nature. Maybe during some religious experience that you may have had. Maybe during meditation, if you're practicing meditation. Maybe when falling in love with another person. When falling in love, what happens is that this ego falls away and we become one with the other. Or in some activity we may undertake, while dancing in a disco, while skydiving, or any other activity, while you're doing it, suddenly sense of unity. That also are examples of unity. So ponder about that for just a few moments. Verse number 4. Just as a steady boat, O Rama, is obtained from a boatman, so also the method of crossing the ocean of samsara is learned by associating with great souls. This verse stresses the importance to be accompanied by a good guide. Some of us have the idea we don't need any teacher, we don't need any guidance. We want to cross the ocean by ourselves. There is such possibility, but it would take a long time. It would be much more challenging. Take as an analogy Pythagoras, the Greek scientist who invented the law of Pythagoras about triangles. He himself in those days was not able to prove his theorem. It was only after he had passed away that other scientists were able to provide the proof of his theorem. So Pythagoras himself knew somehow that x squared plus y squared equals z squared, to put it in those words, but others later on had to prove it for him. And now, today, when you learn mathematics, you see dozens of proofs very quickly because of all the knowledge we have acquired. So wanting to prove the theorem of Pythagoras all over again on your own would not make much sense, because you may not even reach to that conclusion during this lifetime. It would be better maybe to grab a book about mathematics and read up on that, so you don't lose too much time. And in the same way, one could say about spirituality that it helps a lot to be in the presence of those who have experience in these matters. So just like a steady boat would be obtained from a good boatman, you should also cross this ocean of samsara, this ocean of finding the truth, by associating with teachers who have gone through these experiences themselves. It would make a lot of sense. That said, one should not fall into a trap of following a teacher blindly. That is another danger that can happen sometimes. So when you make a choice of looking for a boatman, make sure it is a genuine boatman, a boatman who is really conveying the truth to you, who gives you this sense that yes, he points at your own being, your own truth, without having any demands on you. The same teacher I mentioned before, Jean Klein, always used to say, it's like sharing the flame, from candle to candle. So it is sharing of a flame, but be careful not to fall into the trap where the teacher is outside and demands things from you. We will finish with the 5th verse without interruption. The great remedy for the long-lasting disease of samsara is the inquiry, who am I? To whom does this samsara belong? Which entirely cures it. This is very much what we practice here and what is being practiced in many meditation centers, Buddhist centers, yoga centers, etc. throughout the world. In other words, find out, who am I? You, the viewer, ask yourself, what is it that I am? Who hears the sound of this voice? Who smells the smell? Who tastes the tastes? Who sees this room? Who is aware of these thoughts? Who is aware of these feelings? What is that? That questioning should lead you to what you truly are. And by the way, this is not some kind of an intellectual game. We go beyond thoughts, because the thought, who has the thought, can itself not be a thought. It is that which is aware of thoughts. So I suggest you take a few moments of silence again to reflect on this basic question. And the answer to the question, who am I, should not be a thought or a spoken word. The answer should rather be something like what is described in verse number 1. That calm radiance, which is endless and unlimited by space and time. The pure consciousness, which can be known by experiencing it only. Thank you for your attention, and we will back with the continuation of verse 6 through 10 next time.